the war in America will not be won in Washington, D.C. It'll be won in communities and churches around this country. And it's a call to action for every believer to stand up and speak up for truth and justice. When I say justice, biblical justice in their communities. And it takes courage to stand up and speak, because you're being told that the things you'll say as a Christian is hateful, it's bigoted, but people can call it what they want, but truth is truth. Through my 8 deployments in Afghanistan, my main person that I worked with was a man named Aziz. Aziz was my interpreter. He was my teammate. Ultimately, Aziz was my friend, and he saved my life on multiple occasions. Most people have an interpreter, like a different deployment each time, but the unique position of my job, working in an undercover capacity, Aziz was my teammate for all 8 of my deployments, and primarily who I worked with was Aziz. So I didn't work with a lot of other service members. So we became very close. When President Biden made the announcement to do the withdrawal of Afghanistan, there's a lot of things I disagree with about the withdrawal, by the way, and you and I talked about it earlier. But the one thing I had control of was to not leave my friend in Afghanistan to be killed for what he did for me, for what he did for America. He's one of the most patriotic guys I know, and he did 16 years at the top level Tier 1 Special Operations. And our State Department failed him and many others through the immigration process that we promised them for their service to us. And so I made a decision to put a small team together of special operations veterans, about 12 of us, to go get Aziz, his wife, and 6 kids. And that orchestrated, I think, that obedience to that burden that God put on my heart, that desire to go help my friend. God performed a miracle. And I've gotten a lot of credit for it. So I always make sure I make a point to say, like, I'm not smart enough, logistically capable enough, or even networked enough to pull off what happened. But God orchestrated an absolute modern day miracle that allowed me to be part of not only rescuing Aziz, his wife, and 6 kids, but we stayed and we got 17,000 people out of Afghanistan.
17,000 people out of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Wow. So. Man. And we don't hear about that stuff on the mainstream news.
No. I captured in a book called Saving Aziz, and it's being made in a motion picture film. But even in that book, I just couldn't capture it all. Like the amazing stories of the people that raised their hand to say yes when I asked them to come along side of our team. And so to serve with those guys in that capacity, and see how selfless they were, what they were willing to trade for people that they never met before, from a country they're not from, just to help humans in need. It was absolutely amazing. And when the U.S. military was forced to leave, and the White House was saying there's 100 Americans there, and I was on the news, I was on Fox News saying there's thousands of Americans here, and the White House was saying, well, we had 16,000 Americans there, but we got out 6,000, and there's only 100 left. I'm like, I'm not that great at math, but that's not 100. And by the way, it doesn't matter if there's 1,000 or 100. We don't leave one American behind ever, anywhere. And the fact that we were willing to leave them behind was atrocious. And where I come from, like in my community, we were scorched earth to go get an American left behind. And so we had the ability to make a decision, because we didn't work for the government, to stay there. And we stayed there and continued to rescue our people. Myself and Dennis Price went in a country called Tajikistan for 10 days. Every night we swam across the Panjshir River into Afghanistan to help build routes out for the women and children of the rebellion, the resistance forces, to be able to get out of the country so the men could stay and fight. And we, like I said, 10 days, we built about 6 routes out over about 100 miles of border area where the Chinese military was there, the Russian military, the Taliban, and we were able to build 6 routes out to get, we don't even know how many women and children out of Afghanistan and Tajikistan. And so it was an incredible honor to be part of that. And I remember my wife, as I'm going to the airport, and I think this is a lesson for everybody listening, every American to know, my wife, we'd already got Aziz and his wife and kids out, and we were going to the airport, and I don't know if people get in fights with their wives on the way to the airport, but me and my wife got in a fight on the way to the airport because she was scared. She's like, why are you going? Why are you still doing this? And I just felt this, like, if God just kept opening the doors and that my heart was still burdened, and it's kind of a litmus test for me. If my heart's burdened and God's opening the doors, then I'm going to walk through them. If my heart's burdened and then God's closing the doors, that means that's my own self-interest. That's kind of my test always. And I felt God was still opening the doors for us to go. And my wife's like, why are you going? Like, I know you guys swim across the river in Afghanistan. I'm like, no, why would I do that? And then I just said this, what if it was us? And I think as Americans, we never could think it could be us, but it could be. And I was like, what if this was us? What if it was our sons that would become Taliban, forced to become Taliban? What if it was our daughters that would be sexually enslaved and raped every single day for the rest of her life? What if it was Haley? What if it was Summer? Like, what if it was our daughters? Wouldn't we be praying that someone somewhere will come and help us? And I know I would be. I would be praying that someone would help my daughter. And if God had given me the ability and the desire to go, then I knew we had to. And my wife gave me her consent, and at that point, and we got on a plane and we flew. And I just remember that me and Dennis are flying there and just feeling that fear coming over me. And I just prayed to God in that plane. I'm like, because I knew what we were about to do. And the fear started coming in. I know what fear could do in an environment like that. And I just prayed to God, like, God, if you're burdened my heart to go help these women, and take this fear away, take this anxiety away, and just equip us to help these women. And we landed on a layover, and I told Dennis, and Dennis was like, I'm struggling with the same thing. We prayed together, and then we got on that next flight, and we went to Tajikistan, and we spent 10 days building those routes out.
Wow.
And,
Wow. And won't be until you're in heaven that you're able to see exactly the impact that you guys made and are continuing to make with all these people who you don't even know. It's so inspiring. Chad, not everybody is serving in the military, but I know that you believe that every Christian, man and woman, is called to be a warrior for the kingdom of God.
That's right.
What does that look like?
Well,
it doesn't look like the Taliban.
No, it doesn't. I mean, like I said, we get tied up in physical wars all the time. There's a great interview with Tucker Carlson, just interviews the new president of El Salvador. And he gives this 3-point plan to fix El Salvador. By the way, El Salvador was the most dangerous country in the world, I think, till 3 years ago. And now it's the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. With all the cartels and gangs, the safest country. It's only like number 3 in the world right now. How'd that turn in 3 years? He said he had a 3-point plan that changed the government. Number 1, seek God's wisdom. That was his official policy, to seek God's wisdom. And he overcame the evil in that country and took it to be the most dangerous country in the world to the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. And he said this, he said, everybody gets focused on the physical war, but if you win the physical war, the spiritual war moves on. If you focus on the spiritual war and you win the spiritual war, the physical war will fix itself.
That's right.
And so the most important battle isn't the one I faced as a Force Recon Marine fighting the Taliban. Most important battle is the spiritual one. And you don't have to have a uniform to do that. You have to be a believer. You have to understand who God created you to be, and you have to understand what's at stake if Christians don't stand up and fight. And when I say that, I say that very brutally honest, because there's pastors in this country even. I don't mean just congregation members. There's pastors in this country that don't even have the moral courage to stand on Sunday in a pulpit and speak against the sexual molestation and mutilation and indoctrination of children. And when you have Christians and Christian leaders in our country that don't even have the courage, the moral courage to do that, then we're not fighting the spiritual war in which we're all called to be engaged and be warriors in. And, I think every Christian and believer needs to be engaged in a spiritual war.
Chad, what's your prayer for America right now?
I mean, I believe America, the only way to save America right now is a spiritual revival in this country. It's not going to be one in the halls of D.C. If anybody has their faith in politicians, I believe that we can elect the right politicians and we should vote. We should exercise our right to vote. We should vote for the candidate that most aligns with our biblical beliefs based on policy. That's what we should do. But the war in America will not be won in Washington, D.C. It'll be won in communities and churches around this country. And it's a call to action for every believer to stand up and speak up for truth and justice. When I say justice, biblical justice in their communities. And it takes courage to stand up and speak, because you're being told that the things you'll say as a Christian is hateful, it's bigoted. But people can call it what they want, but truth is truth. And we have to have the courage to speak it.
Chad, what was your definition of a warrior going into the military?
When I went in the military, I was 17 years old, so I was very young and naive. And my definition of a warrior was probably bravado, like strong, capable, skilled, like knowing all the stuff you'd learn in special operations and being able to go and face any adversary around the world. Now my definition of being a warrior is being someone who's willing to sacrifice. It's a sacrificial lifestyle. It's being willing to take your gifts and talents and putting your own ambitions aside, your own well-being aside for the sake of others. And that's also my definition of a man, by the way. I believe, when manhood is when you come to the realization, like the Apostle Paul did, to say, I put childish ways behind me. Life is not about me, it's about others. And so being a warrior to me is about living for others.
Chad, what do you think it's true that even though we have Memorial Day, we have celebrations on Independence Day, that people don't really grasp the nature of the sacrifice that our servicemen and women are making for our freedoms?
I do, and it's really sad to say, because I say that like twofold. One, I believe America, despite what the news says, I believe America is a patriotic country. I believe our patriots across America love our troops. They value our troops. They're thankful for our first responders. So this lie that the media portrays that America doesn't love or care about these people. It's just false. I go around the country. I raise money for nonprofits, and I think last year I raised like $8 million for veterans care. Like, people in this country love their troops, but I also believe there's a certain naiveness to realize what these troops really endure. They're deployed all around the world right now as we sit here, and we think, we're not at war anymore. They're all around the world putting their life on the line, and keeping us safe, and then going around the world and protecting people who can't protect themselves. And so I do believe America's pretty naive to that. Also, there's a little bit of what I say is kind of complex, and I believe I'm also kind of grateful that America's a little naive to it, because I don't want Americans sitting around worrying about their safety all the time. I want them to enjoy the blanket of freedom. I don't want my wife, when I was deployed, my wife didn't know if I was in special operations or a cook. She didn't care. She just had this naiveness to her. And I always appreciated that, because she's not up at night worried about what I'm doing. She's like, oh, he's got it. He's going to work. And so I do appreciate America having a little bit of naiveness, because they are able to enjoy that peace that our warriors give.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of torn on that one.
Yeah, I hear you. I was told a quote once. I can't remember who said it, but they said something like, I wake up every morning torn between two desires: to savor the world and to save the world, which makes planning my day really difficult.
Yes.
And while you guys are out there and you are putting your lives on the line, your wife and your children and others are able to savor the freedoms that we have and those little moments that we have to enjoy the beauty that we have here as Americans. Chad, I want to ask you about your conversion to Christ.
Yeah.
I heard that you came to Christ after combat, and after your wife called you a quitter.
Yeah.
What was that all about, and why did that resonate with you?
Well, like I said, I did 8 deployments in Afghanistan as an AFO, Advanced Force Operator. So essentially working undercover, embedded with local nationals, and putting our assaulters for our special operations unit on target to capture, kill bad guys. So that job is extremely intense. I lost 15 friends over that time of doing that. I had a situation where I was abducted by a foreign intelligence agency. A lot happened to me, and that ended me coming home, being diagnosed with PTSD, a post-traumatic stress disorder, that with debilitating panic attacks, anxiety, depression, and I went in about a 3-year downward spiral. And at the end of that downward spiral, I found myself separated from my family, living alone in an apartment, and I made a decision that my family would be better off. My family might be sad, but they would be better off without me. And I really believed that was the right choice. And if the listeners don't know, that same hopeless thought finds a home in the heart of, over 20 veterans every single day. And we have a veteran suicide epidemic in our country that's still thriving right now. It's at the highest point ever right now. And so I believed that was the solution. So I made a decision to take my life. I had a Glock 22 pistol, and I put my family pictures on the floor around me and tried to build the courage to pull that trigger. And there was one morning that I was in that closet with that pistol, and my wife knocked on my door, and I was actually so ashamed that she would have never came in my apartment. She would have never came in my closet, but I actually hid the gun under a blanket because I was just ashamed of what I was doing. And I ran to the door, and I was so mad at her, which sounds twisted, for interrupting me killing myself, that I just started berating her and yelling at her and asking her to leave. And in that moment, she's my wife, by the way, is not a very calm arguer, but in that moment, she was just totally calm. And she said, how could you do all these things you did? Like, she saw me go into special operations. We met when we were 18 and 19. She saw me do the training and workups for deployment and all these deployments. Also as an athlete, I was a professional athlete, and all these things she saw me do. She's like, how could you do all of these things when it comes to your family? You'll quit. And she's right. I had been successful at all the professional things in my life, everything I put my hands to. But when it came to the most important things, like being a husband and being a father, and being the young 17-year-old kid that raised his hand and made a commitment to do something important in my life, I quit in all those things, including my will to live. In that moment, I made a radical decision that led me to a mentor, and that mentor challenged me, and I came to this conclusion that of all the things I tried, pills, medication, counseling, all these things, none of those things changed my situation, and that led me to him leading me in a relationship with Jesus. And he discipled me for a whole period of a whole year, and it radically changed my life.
Man.
So.
And you started going to church, and you started to engage with a community of believers.
Yeah. So I remember when he presented me with this, like when he sat down across from me, it was at a Starbucks coffee shop, and I'd written a 5-paragraph order for those in the military. It's like an operational order of how I was going to fix my life. It was really good. And I slid it over to him because I wanted him to show it to my wife. And he didn't even read it. He just looked at it and slid it back over to me and told me I was going to fail. And he said, if this plan doesn't have anything to do with your relationship with God, I'm not going to waste your time, and I'm not going to let you waste mine. And so in that process of decision to surrender my life to Jesus, I didn't really understand what that meant. I was just like, I tried everything else, nothing else worked. Why not try something different? And so I gave God a chance. But beyond that decision, Steve discipled me for a period of 1 year. And through the discipleship, what I discovered was all these bad things that happened to me. We didn't even talk about it. My childhood, I had a horrific childhood of abuse and losing my brother was killed when I was 14 and he was 15. Like all these bad things in Afghanistan, losing friends. I'm wearing a bracelet right now. My first friend that died in combat, Foster Harrington, we served him a wedding, was there. My kids were born. We served together for 10 years. Like all this loss, all those bad things, as bad as those things were, those things that lead me to be in that closet with a pistol in my hand, what led me there, the choices that I made in response to those things. And I had never lost the ability to make good choices. And so what the discipleship meant for me was, did I still deal with anxiety, depression, all these things that I dealt with? Of course I did. But the Bible gave me a blueprint to make better choices in response to that. And I became very intentional about using the Bible for my decision making in my everyday life. And that intentionality led to a radical shift in my life that led me to restoration through PTSD, through my own brokenness, gave me hope, and ultimately gave me what I think we all seek as purpose. And it gave me a newfound purpose, and that purpose manifested in just a real deep burden that God put in my heart to share those lessons with others. And I have been doing that for 14 years.